Up all my cares and woes, here I go, singing low. Bye, bye, blackbird, where somebody waits for me, sugar sweet, and so is she. Bye.
Things, faces, friends, places, years and moments half forgotten, laughs, fears, songs, tears, memories are made of this. I remember a time of a wedding of a friend of mine under an arch of aircraft parts and wing spars. A time when the bride and groom left for their honeymoon not by train or car, but in their own private two-seater plane. For this was a couple air-minded, but we all were in 1927. Not in the sense of today's air buses, but in the real do-it-yourself spirit, starting up and putting your own foot down and taking to the air. The time I'm talking about was one in which there seemed to be transport centenaries every other week. A time when railways brought out their oldest and finest and put them proudly on show. Yes, a time to consider just how far we'd come in 100 years and just how far we might go in the next 100. Look at the roads, packed. Buses in the Mall, indeed. That year, King George V gave permission for traffic to pass Buckingham Palace because the road in Piccadilly was under repair. I think it still is. It just shows you how far the petrol engine had pushed its way into our national life. There were some pretty snappy buses, too, by that time, with pneumatic tires. And believe it or not, road sleepers. London to Liverpool by night, tucked up in your own bed. It didn't last long. I don't know what happened to them. I suppose they didn't pay, or they ran out of sheets or something, or alarm clocks. Even then, people were beginning to talk about traffic problems. Compared with now, of course, it was no more than a headache. And parking, watch this. Just in case you thought you were seeing things, once again. It had another advantage in that if you changed your mind, you could turn around for home in seconds. But there again, it didn't last. You probably ran out of front wheels, changing direction at 60 miles an hour. Car versus horse. Well, of course, it ought to win. But I say, we didn't know that there were fences. So now you know how. But I'd rather be on the horse. It won, by the way. What an oil-reeking, roaring place the world had become in the middle 20s. A world enjoying to the full the thrills, not to say the spills, of fast, popular locomotion. But it was all in the game, and it added up to steady mechanical progress, even if once in a while it did lead up a wrong alley. The Ulster Grand Prix in 1928, and a really full house, and how they turned those roads and streets in Northern Ireland into a roaring hell. place was so hot that Malcolm Campbell's Bugatti burst into flames. That's Campbell in white, battling with the extinguishers. The laurels went to another famous ace, Kay Don. But victory or defeat in the road races, one thing in those days everybody had his eye on, the world's land speed record. Paddy Thomas moving out to the flat, wet sands at Pendeen. Moving out, it was to prove to his death. Up through the floorboards came his chain drive, and that was the end of a brave pioneer. But things like that didn't daunt the record seekers. Another car moves out on Pendeen, Malcolm Campbell's 450 horsepower first Bluebird. Days and nights of working and planning, followed by careful last-minute checks, for in this kind of life, as little as possible must be left to chance. On those wet, slithery sands, people held their breath as time and again Bluebird made her runs. There were failures, gearbox trouble, speeds just short of the record, but finally, triumph. And when the clocks had been read, the new world's record stood at 174 miles per hour. But of course, it couldn't be left at that, not in 1927. Bigger, better, faster. 1,000 horsepower crammed into this job. This was the car built for the record by Major Seagrave. His destination was a beach longer, smoother, and safer than Pendeen, Daytona, Florida. And it was there that the clocks read 203.792 miles per hour. So Major Seagrave came back to Britain a fated world hero. But even he had to take 4 days or more on a ship to cross the Atlantic. The Atlantic, that was the draw in those days, how to beat the Atlantic.